From Chicago's Can TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
And hello again. Welcome to another edition of Chicago Newsroom right here on Can TV. There is a brief but very important sweet spot between the the moment that the election returns end and what's known about the elections, and then that moment that the bickering starts all over again. So we have a Thursday show, which means that we're positioned right in the middle of that sweet spot. We can take advantage of it as long as we talk fast and don't waste any time, because the times they are changing already. On Fox News, Charles Krauthammer has already made reference to the failed Obama second term, which puts him in the lead, possibly, for being the pundit to first announce the end of term two's failure. So anyway, we have a lot of local issues to look at today as well. Perhaps the biggest winner Tuesday wasn't on the ballot at all. It was, of course, Rahm Emanuel. He now has friends all over the federal government, and in classic Chicago style, he's got a few favors he wants to call in. So that might be maybe, I don't know, more money for charter schools, many more charter schools. How about extending that red line to 130th Street, or maybe putting marble bathrooms in the Circle line or something? I don't know. Anyway, most intriguing, the Republican massacre in the Illinois legislature. Now that means that the two top Democratic guys, Madigan and Cullerton, they have complete veto power in the legislature, and that means that they'll be able to cut direct deals with Rahm Emanuel. So what's that going to mean to Governor Quinn? He won't have to worry about, Rahm won't have to worry about Quinn getting in the way on things like the casino and all those things. We got a lot of those kind of things to talk about. And of course, the pension amendment, that referendum went down. So what does that mean? And most importantly, Jim Oberweis finally won something. So we'll talk about that and all these things with some really cool experts joining us, old friends coming back to the table today, referring, of course, to Carol Felsenthal, Chicago Magazine, The Hill, blogger, author, all-around knowledgeable person of politics in the Chicago area. Ben Joravsky's here from The Reader. We need say no more. Ben is probably the most frequent guest on our show, and I'm glad to have you back again, Ben. And coming back again, a triumphant return to the program after just a couple of weeks, Kyra Kyles back with us again from Jet Magazine. Glad to have you back too, Kyra.
Thank you for having me.
So, we don't really need to hear from me today. We need to hear from you guys. What happened out there? We should focus a little bit on the local, but let's start with the big guy. What do you make of this? Kyra, why don't you start?
Oh wow, I get to start.
Yeah. What do you
Okay,
think?
my theories on this. Well, I definitely think there was a huge split. Everybody talks about the country being divided, and here you saw it almost happen literally. Of course, President Barack Obama won his second term, but what I found most interesting was it seemed to be a referendum on the Republican platform, and it has them doing a lot of introspection about, what is our platform party moving forward? How can we get back these constituents that we very clearly lost, like the Latino population? How can we make ourselves more likable, for example? Because I think one thing that you did see was kind of a referendum that their politics and that the message they're putting out there is arcane. That's what I got from the results.
It's a great word, arcane. Yeah. And I think that the Romney ran a kind of a 20th century campaign in the 21st century, and you really saw this by the strange promotion that the Romney people gave of how they were not only going to win, but they were going to win big. And there's a lot of disgruntlement among the super PAC donors who said, you should have known that. And, I was thinking they should have, the people like Sheldon Adelson, the people like our Ricketts, whose sons and daughter owns the Sun-Times, they should have taken, the Cubs. Oh my gosh, I'm looking at the Sun-Times. Who owns the Chicago Cubs and who knows what else, but to come. But they should have taken those millions of dollars. They should have put it in the ground game, because that is one place, and just the getting out the vote. And then if you look at Ohio, the Romney team had a third of the get out the vote effort that the Obama team did. And then of course the other subject is, I find fascinating in Truth is Stranger Than Fiction, Hurricane Sandy, and the embrace of Governor Chris Christie. And did you know that Governor Chris Christie's mother, who was a big influence on his Italian upbringing, was named Sandra and called Sandy? Now, if you were writing, a novel and you put those details in the novel, would your editor say you out of your mind?
Yeah. Before we get off that though, I just have this image in my mind of Sheldon calling customer service this morning and saying, "I purchased President of the United States and it hasn't arrived."
Yeah. He said something amazing, and as a Jewish woman, it really struck home to me. What he said was that he didn't regret it because you could spend your money that way, or you could be a Jewish husband, which I assume meant.
What does that mean?
That's
really dumbfounded by that.
He could have spent it all on his wife.
That's the way he ended. But in the end, the super PACs really meant nothing. They created a lot of noise, and it was all sound and maybe fury, but nothing more.
I know I'm very biased in these things.
You are?
Yes.
That's why we love you, Ben. That's why we have you.
I mean, I could not in a million years imagine, and I hope I'm not offending any of my co-guests here, I could not in a million years imagine voting for the Republican Party's candidates at this stage. They're such a thoroughly unlikable party. They make the most outrageous comments, particularly in regards to abortion and rape and things like that. So I think not that they would ever take advice from me, but they really got to rethink this whole, the contempt they hold for people who disagree with them. And
I would agree with that. I mean, I think definitely you even see from some of the vitriol that you see in social media. There were a lot of bigoted comments. There were a lot of comments about taking the country back. You had Donald Trump come out and say that we need to wage a revolution. I mean, their rhetoric is just, it's inflammatory.
And it is inflammatory.
It's inflammatory.
And I'm right, Trump, now he's the spokesman.
And these
for
I don't know, the birther movement, is that what he is?
Yeah.
Or
Well, it's a good.
the hair club for men, something like that.
I love that picture of him with his hair all
his
messed
hair
up,
aflap.
and the
Right.
caption was hurricane damage.
Wow.
Could I cut in before you just say that once?
Defend the Republicans, please.
When you look at the popular vote, though, there
Right.
wasn't that much room.
That's
We
it.
don't
And I
know.
said that.
We
Yeah, the
don't
country was
know
split.
how.
Right,
We
right.
don't know how Florida's going to come down. I think it'll come down for Obama.
Well, he's ahead.
But in the popular vote in 2012, you had much less distance than you did in 2008.
You're right.
So
Right.
that means
The point is that they spend millions and millions and millions of dollars
1.2
with commercials battering us over the heads, particularly in the swing states, and they couldn't win the election. And
Right.
if I was in charge of the Republican Party, which is such an odd thought, I can't even think about it, but I would say
the
maybe
job
we should
is open.
rethink the way we approach the electorate. I mean, even when we try to buy their votes.
I mean, it's about reimagination. I mean, the Democrats have had to do the same. I agree. I mean, we should not, act as though those Republicans, who I do believe are on the fringe, they're just the most vocal. These are the people that you see.
Right.
Donald Trump does not represent the Republican Party. I'm sure they would love for him to shut himself away in his tower and lock the door from the outside and the inside. Right. But what I'm saying is they allowed that rhetoric to kind of take over. And with social media, you have to be very careful with your messages because of how far they go.
Well, look how they battered. I mean, with Christie for welcoming Obama to his state.
To a storm-ravaged state.
And just the
it wouldn't have
vitriol.
happened it wouldn't have happened except that it happened in those last few days
That's
before
right.
the election.
Before we get too far off on this, though, I do want to just read from the great philosopher Bill O'Reilly.
Oh, no.
I don't know if...
Can I cover my ears during this portion?
I don't know if you guys saw this moment on TV, but when Bill O'Reilly just melted down, and I sat and transcribed this last
night. You're talking about an election night. Early on. Yeah,
I mean,
he was one of many, but please.
We're a low-budget show. We don't have the clip. But what he said was...
do an imitation.
Can you do it like he would do it?
I don't know. Let's see.
Try.
It's a changing country. The demographics are changing. It's not a traditional America anymore.
Wow.
And there are 50% of the voting public who want stuff. They want things. And who's going to give them things? President Obama.
Wow.
The white establishment is now the minority.
Wait,
no.
Was that O'Reilly?
Dum, dum, dum.
That was Bill O'Reilly. No, that was Bill O'Reilly.
Very similar.
Yeah,
thing.
but
Well, they get the same talking points.
O'Reilly went on the Fox News election coverage with that beautiful blonde woman. They're all beautiful and
yeah,
blonde,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I can't, Megyn Kelly.
Megyn Kelly.
Megyn
I want to
Kelly.
talk about Megyn Kelly too.
And
but-
Brett Baer.
Yeah.
And Brett Baer looked pale, and his lips like disappeared. It was just like a straight
a
line.
line.
They knew what was coming. And then O'Reilly came on, and it was before the swing states had gone into anybody's count, but he knew what was coming, and he gave this kind of, you know.
Hey, white people, it's over.
Wake up, it's over.
So that's why I'm saying they've really got to rethink how their presentation, what they say, their worldview.
Right.
And
no more abortion. No more
Well,
abortion.
Please don't speak about rape at all.
Yeah,
On
don't-
any level.
right. Yeah,
Right.
talk about
On any
rape.
level, unless you're talking about prevention methods, policing, just leave the topic alone.
As a media guy, I just have to say that the almost complete melting down of Fox News before your very eyes. I mean, I spent
Have you
more
seen
time
the
watching
Tumblr
Fox.
page? They have a Tumblr page with a freeze frame on each one of their faces.
Oh, is that
like
right?
Karl Rove, O'Reilly. It's priceless. I'll send you the link.
And Krauthammer, and you had all of these people. You had Charles Krauthammer,
Who always
you had,
looks like he died about 5 years ago anyway, but now he looks like he's just like.
but you know, but they or not a Fox News guy, an ABC guy. George Will, who you think of as being the most sober-minded man in the universe, and you know, predicting a blowout in the Electoral College for Romney.
That I find really why they were
Dick Morris.
Because
Dick Morris,
the smart money said that Obama was going to win. He was going to win by the margin he did win by. So why? I can't understand where the Republicans.
The polls were correct. By
The
way.
polls were correct.
Let's-
Nate Silver,
yeah.
the smart money,
Nate
the
Silver,
smart guy in the
right,
world,
right.
the country when it comes
Stay
to stuff.
calm and believe
He
in
said
me,
it was a
Nate
90% chance of Obama winning,
Yeah.
and he did it state by state. So why were they fooling themselves, or were they trying to win over voters? Like try to convince
that
voters.
would be the opposite, because if you are out there saying we have it in the bag, we're going to win, then your
You let
voters
the
are
people kind of
motivated.
relax to a certain point.
Right.
No, but I think there's this
didn't
notion
understand
that
it at all.
if you say momentum's on your side, I'm not saying I agree with this,
Right.
that people will be swayed. Oh, I want to vote for a winner.
Yeah.
So like.
You know, I don't know if it works that way. I think that was one of the things that the president was up against, this complacency, it's handled. There's no need for me to do it. I mean, you saw with some of the voter suppression tactics, which I found deplorable.
Yeah.
I think that energized people to come out and vote. The idea that this, you know, Mitt Romney could win. This is not, you know, I don't think this would have happened years ago.
McCain.
It's not
It's
McCain. It wasn't really that viable at first. Then at a certain point it became obvious. There is a strong chance. You'd better get up and get out and vote. You saw the pregnant woman who voted as she was in labor?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great.
That's-
In other
that's-
words, and interestingly, over on
That's motivation,
So
right
you're telling me
there.
not only
MSNBC,
the Republicans are not only unlikable, they're not that very smart.
Well, you know, I think Mitt Romney, whatever you want to say about him, he is a man of enormous faith. I can't pretend to understand the Mormon religion, then I can't pretend to understand most religions, but he is a man of faith who didn't write a concession speech, and he, in his, you know, David Axelrod famously said about Barack Obama, you could say that Mitt Romney in his loins, if that's an image you want to
I don't want to
conjure, then he believed,
Yeah.
as I think did Ann Romney, who looked more devastated than
She
any,
did.
and not since Pat Nixon, who cried when he lost to Kennedy,
Right.
and pushed Kennedy for recount, by the way, pushed Nixon for recount, rather. I think in his heart and in his soul, he thought he was going to win this,
But you know what?
and he carried a lot of people.
That could also be interpreted, though, as a sense of entitlement, too.
Oh,
you know,
sure.
it could be faith, but it also could be, hey, you know, I'm President Mitt Romney. I've already previously introduced my wife as the next First Lady. I took it almost as a sign
And he
of
said it in
of
his
arrogance,
concession
honestly.
speech. He said he had that weird line like, "Oh, and she would have made a great
Right.
First Lady." What
Yes.
was that about? you know?
I think it's generally been accepted that the Mitt Romney campaign told a lot of fibs out there, and I would say that the "I didn't write a concession" speech was the last fib of that campaign.
yeah.
Well, I certainly hope that wasn't written.
I don't
because
think
if it
it
was,
was. It sounded
If
like
it was written,
I'll give
I
you
lost
that.
even a little bit more
So
respect
I
for
wanted
it.
to follow up on what you were saying before about over on MSNBC. Al Sharpton did a long monologue on how the minority voters in this country, for various reasons, black voters because of their own reasons, but certainly Latinos because of all the immigration and everything, these people were not motivated to get out and vote again for Barack Obama in significant enough numbers to have won, and that he would not have won but for the fact that they were offended by the voter suppression efforts that the Republicans put out. So Al Sharpton's view is that Obama won because the Republicans tried so hard to suppress minority voters. What do you think of that?
No, I don't know that I necessarily buy into that. I definitely know that there is a percentage of African American voters who were put off by President Barack Obama's embracing of same-sex marriage. His evolution on that platform. I think personally that that's unfortunate, that would skew your vote to that degree. I do think that people supported the president. What I want to say is that I think they expected more. What you'll hear a lot if you listen to urban radio was, where is the agenda for Black America?
Right.
How are we going to
Absolutely.
help
Yes.
African Americans? And though I don't necessarily personally think that that's fair to say that, you know, he is the president of the United States. He can't be the president of Black America, or he would not have been reelected. So, though I do agree, though, that the voter suppression made it imperative. Like, I know many, many people that early voted just to make sure that they were not dissuaded from voting. There was a real fear. And then people in my mother's generation, that's like a flashback. You know, when you actually would go to the polls and someone would try to dissuade you from
I think
voting.
that's a very good point. That
Like,
just triggers
it triggers
some
a visceral
huge
reaction. It
memories,
really does. And I will
those
tell
memories
you,
are not distant.
yes, my mother knows that I vote, but she was not kidding around this time. I mean, she asked me several times, have you voted? Have you voted? I
Did you
tried
vote
3
early,
times.
or
I
did
did.
you?
Yes,
Yeah.
I did.
Well, no, this gets back to what I was saying about the Republican Party. And again, it looks like I'm pounding on it, but I am.
Oh, why
They're
would you?
so
Ben.
freaking unlikable. So this is the second election in a row where they've sort of targeted black people as a voting mass. Instead of trying to win a black voter over, they say, well, we're just going to try to deter you from voting. And implying that
It was a
in black
desperate
areas
tactic.
there's overwhelming fraud just
Right.
by virtue of the fact that it's a black area.
And what makes that so repugnant to me is that it attempts to treat these two gigantic populations as though they're all sort of intellectually and
Right, like there's no
the same.
diversity within it.
Right.
You know,
I
I'm
mean-
an African American voter, but I might also be,
Well,
you know, a voter. I might be in the 1%. How do you know?
As
Right.
you've pointed out, I mean, there are a lot.
47%,
There are a
1%.
lot of culturally conservative African Americans in this country, and there are a lot of culturally conservative Latinos
Okay,
in
but
this
let me
country.
just say this.
And
to
the
that.
and the Republicans
it
just
was
don't seem capable of.
99.9% black vote for Obama.
No, I understand,
I
but
mean,
I'm
you take
just
a look
saying
at the
that
voting results
they-
out of Chicago's black precincts, and aside from exit polls, which are flawed because some people occasionally don't tell the truth, talk about fibbing, it's overwhelming support. So then the issue for a Republican is, how do we deal with that? Do we deal with that by antagonizing and insulting the people who are going to vote for Barack Obama by implying that there's cheating here and they're not real voters and try
Right.
to take away their right to vote?
Or have robocalls calling them saying that they are not registered.
Yeah, right, registered to
Or,
vote.
or, the, or
tax.
election
Yeah.
day has been
Right. Is the
changed.
day after.
But you know, the
Yeah.
Latino vote, I think that's very important. And what they had in their mind there when, you know, Mitt Romney's the guy who famously uttered the phrase self-deportation. Is that a scary sounding phrase?
It
you know?
is.
It's scary as extremely
He
conservative
really-
or severely
Yes,
conservative.
he really campaigned toward the 47%
Yeah.
against
Right.
the 47% that he spoke up. They clearly discarded people, and I think that's important. You can't discard anyone.
Not
You
in
see
this
how close
country,
it
not
was?
anymore.
It wasn't a trouncing. He was not trounced. So we can't pretend that everyone is alienated from the Republican Party. Clearly there are people that really do align themselves with that belief system, but I think the other things they did culturally were so repugnant that any support they would have gotten, they annihilated. I also think it's important to say that, you know, African Americans and minorities have typically voted Democrat. So it's not necessarily like someone said, oh, you know, hey, let me go vote for the person that matches me. You know?
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's an
The vote
important
was
point to
strong for
bring out.
Kerry and
Right.
Gore.
Right,
yeah.
right.
Precisely.
So
and they would be
which
strong for Clinton.
Republican because I'm already looking toward 2016 when I see Hillary and Joe Biden, and then on the Republican side, Chris Christie and Bobby Jindal. Is there a Republican that you could conjure up, envision as somebody who would be able to break if the Republican candidate in 2016 does not figure out a way to appeal to minority voters and also women of all economic classes, status, and colors, then, but who would that, sometimes I think, well, Chris Christie is a kind of a larger.
Carol, couldn't we let Barack Obama be president?
No,
for like
I
a
know.
year or
I
so?
think that's a great question, though.
You're absolutely right. But people are jockeying. People are jockeying
Already,
for position.
right.
And of course,
somebody's got a clock up. Somebody's got a website with a clock and
well,
told
the Fox
officials-
News always does that. But one thing, Bill Clinton
until the New Hampshire primary.
was a very important player
He was.
in
Yes,
this
he was. Yes.
election. And the first call that Mitt Romney made after taking the concession call, that Barack Obama made after taking the concession call from Mitt Romney, was he called Bill Clinton to thank him. But then in this tangled, twisted relationship that they had when he gave his speech,
He didn't mention
Bill Clinton.
That's interesting.
Right.
Anyway, to answer your question, George Ryan. I know a lot of Democrats who still like George Ryan.
And
as
he'll
a
be out
Republican,
of prison,
in
right?
time.
Did you?
Well, you guys know, I got a lot of Democrats in my family
You had
still
me
love
there.
George Ryan.
Yeah.
Because
Go to the schools.
He was so nice to
Because
his
he was a
wife.
deal
made it.
maker.
He was a
He
deal
could
maker.
make things happen.
Yeah, he built
could make-
Illinois.
He
so
was a rainmaker.
We're
yeah.
weird in this state.
All right, so let's talk about Illinois. Can we just for a couple of minutes?
We have to?
Sure.
Yeah.
We are here after all.
Yeah, we do live
Illinois.
in Illinois. I mean, I don't know if it's historic, but it was one heck of a blowout for the Republicans in the House and.
Well, didn't they
and
just
the Illinois
gerrymander
Senate.
the districts? I mean, isn't that what it's all about, Kenneth? They got. I mean, who
You
drew
make
the
me
districts?
feel naive.
I mean, Madigan drew the districts, didn't he? So
it works in
I mean, it
reverse.
wasn't like
All right, well then that's it. Okay, so I guess that
we talk about the Bulls.
But doesn't that make you, as a voter, there were some things that happened in this election that I found really discouraging, not only as a voter, but as an informed voter who goes into I always vote
think I can
on the
guess.
on the day of,
what it is.
and I bring my Chicago Council of Lawyers,
Oh my God,
judicial.
you go through those judges?
Yeah, and it's really hard. I can never match it up properly.
And all that effort is for naught because they all
But
get reelected.
doesn't matter.
But so here in Illinois, we had editorial after editorial,
right.
pundit after pundit saying, Mike Madigan, the most powerful and the most not repugnant, but he's a harmful figure in Illinois politics, and then they win. Madigan wins in the House a veto-proof majority,
Yes. Yeah.
and Cullerton, another
Right.
figure who comes under a lot of criticism, wins a veto-proof majority in the Senate. So who's listening to stuff? And
Nobody.
then you
Nobody.
have
The journalists listen to
Yeah,
each
that's
other.
how they're right.
you have Derek Smith
Yeah.
reelected. You have Jesse Jackson Jr.
haven't even
reelected. You
talked
have
about-
the
we
you
haven't
have
talked
the
about Jesse
you have the
Jackson
judge. You have the judge who threw her keys at
Yeah,
the
no.
guard in the Daily Center and had to go to
Right.
26 in
Right.
California, right? So it makes you feel like
Nobody. You're
It
helpless.
fits our reputation, though. I mean, we were already humiliated when we had Blagojevich doing
Reelected.
I mean,
Yes.
at this point, I think people have tossed up their hands. They just know that this is the way Illinois does it. It's kind of like The Sopranos
Yeah.
in Springfield.
Yeah.
You just have to accept
Okay,
that.
it's triage time. We're down to like 3 minutes here. But we have to talk about Jesse Jackson Jr. It is possible in our state and in our culture for someone to absolutely not run for office, have no presence whatsoever, and then have no election night party, make no public appearances whatsoever, and win overwhelmingly. I mean, that's an even better performance than the guys who do it when they're dead.
No, we have we have such a unique voting electorate, you know, and I'm always on the losing side of it. Okay,
Yes, you are.
generally,
Yeah,
as you
yes,
know.
I
mean,
can
I've been
vouch for that.
20 years running, getting clobbered by Mayor Daley, and then
Ben Joravsky, 20
Rahm.
years of being on the losing side.
Losing side and counting. So this will continue as long as Mayor Rahm's the mayor. So I just have to applaud the Chicago electorate at some point. I mean, they overwhelmingly elected Derek Smith, even though he was arrested and charged. I think that's more outrageous than Jesse Jackson Jr.
Yeah.
But only 12 people at his victory party. No, I was at.
Yeah, I don't know who wants to be with the guy, you know. So and I just, you know, it's so funny about the judges. You're so right. There was this one judge that every paper was denouncing.
Right.
So the voters just don't pay attention. I hate to tell you guys, they don't read papers. They don't really think. I hate to be so cynical and jaded about
You
our.
sound like Bill Maher. All
I
of a
think
sudden.
people were just much more focused, as the show was, on the national election. I don't think they did the research.
Yeah, we're just as
God.
good.
But Jesse Jackson Jr. has been
Oh,
very
yeah,
much
you
in the
know,
national
everybody
Jesse
knew
Jackson.
that. I
And
mean,
the
but
news
everything else,
today
judges,
in the
people don't
Sneed
research
column, and
that.
Yeah,
she's
that's
gotten
true.
much better
Right,
lately.
right,
She's
right.
got all the scoop.
Yeah,
Somebody,
she's
you know,
got this line into Jesse Jackson.
right?
that-
And
she's
the
like his press
news,
secretary.
the news that there was campaign money redecorating his house, but also the news that he bought a $40,000 Rolex watch for his
Right.
girlfriend. That will stay in your mind forever. That's the
Right,
kind of
right.
detail. That's twice as much as a house I grew up in in West Rogers Park.
I
costs.
was listening
That's
to
true.
How
John
much a
Cass
Rolex
on the
cost?
radio coming down here this morning, and he said something about, and the worst part about it is, who pays $40,000? Who pays retail for a Rolex watch?
Right. Aren't you somebody? You shouldn't have to pay that kind of price.
No, but I mean, I think you're right though. That is an image that sticks in your mind. It's like, oh my God,
It's so
you're buying
concrete.
a watch for
It's so
someone.
Chicago. I mean, that is, unfortunately, that is the reputation that we have, and we earned it. It's
Yes.
you know, back in Tammany Hall, you
Yeah.
remember that, you know, historically, Chicago is known for that. I was embarrassed, I will admit that, as a journalist, as a human being who went into
Which part you were embarrassed by? Jesse Jackson Jr.?
embarrassed by the farce that is the Chicago electoral
Everything,
process,
yeah,
pretty much,
yeah.
in
Well, by the way,
summation.
I don't think there was a Chicago vote. We cannot. Okay, I could say most Chicago voters are utterly ignorant about the judicial process. No idea about the candidates. But I'm pretty safe to say that pretty much every constituent in the 2nd Congressional knows the story of Jesse Jackson Jr.
Yeah.
Yes,
all
they
the ups and
definitely
downs,
do.
and they still voted for him.
But
so.
And I think that's elevated to a national story
legislature,
as well.
Yeah.
If you go out on the street here, walk over to Halsted Street in Greektown, and you stop people and you ask them who their state rep and their state senator, people who know who their congresswoman is
Right.
don't know that.
Yeah.
No,
It's
you're
just,
right.
It's confusing
It is
as could be
confusing,
yes.
to almost everybody. People have no relationship or sense of who those people are.
Right.
But they do know Mike Madigan, and he's demonized, and he's still
Right.
not
They know their
anything
aldermen.
about it.
So-
I bet you they
Yeah,
know their
they all
aldermen.
know
Right.
their
Aldermen.
So were you guys surprised to see Tammy Duckworth come in so strongly? How about Bill Foster? Was that a surprise?
That
to
was a
anybody?
surprise, and there are two reasons for it. One of them is that Judy Biggert just seemed too old. And I hate to say that, but I think it was there were too long pauses in her response. And also Aurora has a big Latino population, and it went big time for Foster.
But again, didn't the
That's why she
Democrats
lost.
draw the boundaries?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
they
mean,
did.
why are we surprised?
Why are we
I mean, they drew
They're
the
drawing the
boundaries,
boundaries.
guys.
Yeah,
This
some
is not
people
like an
were-
even race, you know, where everybody starts at the same, you know?
Dole Schneider was surprised.
Dole Schneider was
But
a big
again,
surprise.
that was a redrawn boundary
Right,
that
was
made him
also-
more Democrat. He
yeah,
got help.
so
The
Ben
old
was that
boundary.
one.
got help.
I
You
go
are
whatever
right.
you want. It's
You're
called
right.
gerrymandering. It's not like a 100-yard
We should make that a
dash where everybody
candidate.
starts
Let
and
us-
ends at the same place.
Let us bring this down to a calm conclusion with some words from our president. He said, as it has for more than 2 centuries, progress will come in fits and starts. It's not always a straight line.
That's true.
All right? Okay.
Especially if it's a boundary, a political boundary.
It's never a straight line.
Never a
squiggly
straight
little
line.
thing.
All right, we've got to go. Thank you, Ben Joravsky. Thank you, Carol Felsenthal. Thank you, Kyra Kyles. All of you for being here. A really interesting discussion today. I loved it. Thanks and I hope you'll be back again. You have been watching Chicago Newsroom. It's a community service of CAN TV, and you can find us here on cable just like you are right now, but you can also see us online anytime by going to the address that they're going to magically bring up on the screen right now. See it? Check it out there. You can also see us on iTunes and listen to us on iTunes too. I'm Ken Davis. Thanks so much. We'll be back next week with even more about this and other things on Chicago Newsroom. Talk to you later. Bye.